What happens when a rich woman's arrogance meets the unexpected generosity of a waitress? The lesson she learns may just change her life forever. The restaurant buzzed with the sounds of clinking glasses and murmurs of the wealthy patrons enjoying their meals, but one entrance immediately commanded attention. A woman in her mid-40s walked through the grand double doors, draped in an elegant fur coat and towering heels. Her diamond earrings sparkled with every movement, and the designer handbag slung over her shoulder screamed affluence. She glanced around the room with an air of superiority, her eyes sweeping over the decor as if she were inspecting the establishment rather than enjoying a meal. She was used to this kind of luxury, the kind she never questioned, always expecting the best. In stark contrast, Lily, a 25-year-old waitress, weaved through the tables, balancing plates with an almost robotic precision. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled from the long shifts, and dark circles under her eyes hinted at the exhaustion that came from working back-to-back hours with little time for rest. Today had been no different. A parade of demanding customers, all eager to voice their displeasure over the smallest imperfections, had left her feeling drained. Despite the exhaustion, Lily maintained a warm, patient smile, determined to offer each guest the best service she could, knowing that her tips were essential for making ends meet. As the rich woman took her seat, a dismissive glance passed over Lily, as if she were merely a cog in the machine, here to serve but not to be noticed. Lily's tired eyes met hers briefly, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the difference in their worlds. The meal unfolded as expected. Luxurious, extravagant, and served with an air of formality. The rich woman ordered the most expensive items on the menu with barely a glance at the prices, her tone curt as she demanded the best of everything. "I'll have the truffle-stuffed lobster, and the finest wine you have," she instructed, as if she were royalty, making demands of a servant. Lily, though tired from the constant rush of orders, nodded politely and moved swiftly to fulfill the woman's requests. Despite the woman's condescending attitude, she didn't falter in her professionalism, doing her best to ensure every dish arrived on time and to perfection. When the meal came to an end, the woman barely acknowledged Lily as the bill was placed before her. Instead, she took her time counting every detail, scrutinizing the charges with a critical eye. When Lily returned to check on her, the woman barely looked up, her voice dripping with entitlement. "The service wasn't up to my usual expectations," she remarked coldly. "I think I'll pass on the tip this time. I expect more for what I paid." Lily's heart sank, but she simply nodded, her exhaustion momentarily eclipsed by the sting of the remark. She fought to keep her smile in place. "Thank you for dining with us," she said quietly, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. She turned and walked away, her mind racing with disappointment, but her steps remained steady, her professionalism intact. As the rich woman stood up to leave, ready to make her way to the door, she noticed Lily approaching again. This time, however, there was something different. The waitress held a small envelope in her hand, her face calm and composed, though her eyes seemed to hold something more. An unspoken purpose. The woman paused, her brow furrowing in confusion, as Lily walked up and gently placed the envelope on the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said softly. "I believe this belongs to you." The rich woman's initial thought was that it was some form of apology, but that thought quickly dissipated when Lily turned and walked away, without saying another word. Curious, the woman picked up the envelope, her fingers brushing over the smooth paper. She opened it, expecting perhaps a note of some kind, but what she found inside was something entirely unexpected. There, in the corner of the bill, was a receipt indicating that Lily had paid for the entire meal. Every cent. Her initial shock turned to confusion, and then to something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. How could a waitress, someone she had barely acknowledged, afford to pay for her extravagant meal? Inside the envelope was a brief note, written in neat handwriting. "I believe kindness and humility are worth more than wealth. I hope you remember this moment and consider the impact of your actions on others." The rich woman's face flushed with embarrassment, the weight of the note settling heavily on her conscience. The rich woman stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she stared down at the note. The restaurant, once filled with the hum of conversations, suddenly felt distant, as if the world had narrowed down to just her and the words in front of her. Kindness and humility are worth more than wealth. The words swirled in her mind, challenging everything she had ever believed about herself and the world she inhabited. As she reread the note, a wave of realization washed over her. Flashbacks of the afternoon flooded her thoughts. Her dismissive tone as she ordered, her disregard for the waitress's efforts, the way she had treated the service like an afterthought, as if Lily were invisible. She had assumed that her money gave her the right to demand perfection without considering the human effort behind the service. The coldness with which she had refused the tip suddenly seemed petty and cruel. Her mind wandered back to the brief interaction with Lily, how the waitress had smiled through it all, how she hadn't argued even though the insult was clear. And then, the act of generosity, paying for the meal, something the rich woman never would have expected from someone in Lily's position. The irony hit her hard. She, the woman who had everything, had failed to recognize the value of kindness. The waitress, with so little in comparison, had taught her a lesson in humility she would never forget. In that moment, she felt something shift inside her, a deep, uncomfortable sense of shame, but also an understanding of what truly mattered. The rich woman's guilt gnawed at her as she stood there, staring at the empty table, the note still in her hand. She knew she had to do something to make things right, but as she looked around the restaurant, she saw that Lily had already left for the day. There was no way to apologize directly, to tell her she was sorry for her arrogance and indifference. She felt the sting of her previous actions more sharply now than ever before. Determined to make amends, the woman approached the restaurant manager. With a nervous edge in her voice, she asked if she could make a donation to the establishment, a donation in Lily's name, something that might show her appreciation for the waitress's unexpected kindness. The manager, surprised but pleased, quickly agreed. The woman wrote a generous check, a small token compared to the meal she had consumed, but it felt like the first step toward redemption. As she left the restaurant, the woman's mind was filled with a new awareness. She thought about how her wealth had given her a sense of entitlement, how she had taken people for granted, assuming their service was owed to her. But the waitress had shown her a different world, a world where kindness wasn't measured by money, but by the actions of the heart. From that day on, the rich woman began to view others with a different perspective. She was more mindful of how her behavior impacted those around her. The lessons of humility and generosity lingered in her thoughts, and slowly, her perspective on money, kindness, and respect began to change. Months passed since the day the rich woman had encountered Lily's unexpected act of kindness, but the memory had stayed with her. She often found herself thinking back to that afternoon in the restaurant, recalling how her world had been upended by the simplest yet most profound gesture. In her mind, she could still picture Lily's calm, patient smile as she had paid for her extravagant meal, a moment that had completely shifted her understanding of what truly mattered. The woman's life had slowly begun to change since that day. She started paying closer attention to the way she treated others, especially those who worked in service industries, those she had once dismissed so easily. It wasn't just about the tip anymore, it was about the respect and kindness she offered, regardless of who the person was or their place in the world. She had realized that small acts of generosity could have an immeasurable impact, far beyond the value of money. Lily, with her modest means, had taught her more than any lecture or book could. Her generosity had opened the rich woman's eyes to the importance of humility and the power of a single, thoughtful act. In reflecting on that moment, the woman understood that change didn't always have to come from grand gestures or monumental events. Sometimes it took a simple lesson, given by someone with far less than you, to change your entire outlook on life. And for the rich woman, Lily's lesson would stay with her forever.